CEO Morris, can you let us know who is here with staff for staff?
Certainly, thank you, Madam Chair. We have with us this evening Treasurer Procedural, Director Costello, Director Manhire, our Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, Julia Crowder, our Planner, Senior Planner, Carl Grenke, and of course, Nadine Bennett, our Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. On June 13th, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. And if there are, I believe we do have an amendment to the agenda, Deputy Clerk Bennett.
Yes, we do. With your permission, Madam Chair, we would like to add the strategic plan update that was deferred a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you very much. And so we'll add that as 8.8.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any disclosure of monetary interests? Seeing none, but if one occurs to someone as we're moving through the agenda, certainly identify it whenever you have that opportunity. There are no adoption of minutes tonight. CEO Morris, do you want to introduce whatever director's reports we have this evening?
Yes, we have two this evening, starting with Director Manhire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick updates. The Town Hall Phase 3 is proceeding as planned. We have carpenters on site now, and as Council's aware, there was a carpenter strike for a couple of weeks, so we're very glad to see them there. We're still online for our timing for completion, and within the next week, we should also have confirmation of any efficiencies that we've found through the process, and we'll report that back to Council once we have it. We have a bandstand tender out right now. We've extended the date at the request of a couple of people that have picked up the packages. And so that now closes on June 23rd at 11:05. And we encourage anybody who has capacity and interest and expertise to pick up one of those packages. And then just wanted to let Council know that we have introduced lighting, solar lighting into the dog park area. Those solar lights are the same type of design as we're vetting with Parks Canada, and ideally we get those approved, and they will go in the parking lot at the Bascule Bridge area, as well as along Evergreen Avenue once we have that approval.
Thank you. And Councilor McGuire, you had a question for Director Manhire?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, Director Manhire, I thought for our lighting, we were going with the same kind of lighting we had on Becker Street. So I noticed the lighting in the dog park doesn't match that. And if we're going to expand that into the Bascule Bridge area, it seems like now we're having two different styles where we had put off doing that so we'd have one consistent style. What's going on with that?
It's thank you. That's a great question. It's not the same exact design. It's complementary. But what we were looking at is actually doing solar lighting for those areas so that we didn't have to run power, and that it was a little bit more environmentally friendly. And we didn't have the exact feature or fixture available in a solar lighting option. So we went with something that was similar.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Brennan.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate Art on the dog park, and as you know, we started that many years ago, and the features that have been added are really great. The dog park looks great. It's so well used, and the lighting is a fantastic feature. A couple other things that in my time that were requested and wondered about is some sort of netting to prevent balls from going in there, because the ball fields are well used as well. And the other one was water. I know that's problematic, but it looks great and well used. And so congratulations on that. And one thing that I thought of years ago that we pursued a little bit was putting in a fire hydrant somewhere in the dog park, because dogs like fire hydrants.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. I do want to take just 1 second too to say thank you to Director Manhar for the preview of what the town hall looks like down to the stone that's in there. It was a very interesting and enlightening tour that we had, including the old jail cell with some graffiti on it. So graffiti has been around that long. So thank you. Yes, Councillor or Director Manhar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to respond to Councillor Brennan's comment about the netting. We are taking a look at that. We would have to install new standards and things down in that area. So it is something that we're trying to find the best solution for it so that everybody can use the area safely.
Thank you. And CO Morris, there was another report.
Yes, the second of two will be from Ms. Crowder.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I have a few quick updates for council. The picnic program has launched again for the 3rd season. It launched on Friday, so we're really excited to see that program back. This year it features a picnic blanket instead of the mug, so we looked at switching it up. There's been a lot of buzz in the community already, so we encourage everyone to go and get a picnic basket. Right now we have 7 participating businesses, and we expect to have a few more come on board as the program moves forward. In the last 2 years since its inception, we've generated approximately $50,000 for local businesses, so that's really exciting. It's been a great program. The next update is with regards to the water treatment plant redevelopment. The RFP closes this Friday at noon. So we're excited to see what proposals come out of those. The evaluation team will meet next week and then again at the end of the month, and then we'll be bringing any proposals to council for their consideration. We're also looking at doing RFPs in the next few weeks for the website, for the Parkette mural, and as well as the Center Street redevelopment visioning. So in July, we're looking to release those RFPs to start getting vendors for those projects. And the last update is with regards to Canada Day. So Canada Day is coming fast. We have about 3 weeks. Staff has planned a really great event at Lower Reach Park. We're just starting to engage vendors for the market, and we'll be providing some additional information and marketing in the next week to the rest of the community. So we hope to see you all there. And that's it.
Thank you, Julia. If there are no other reports, then we have no correspondence this evening. We do have an in-camera issue, so council will be going into closed session. We ask for your patience and we'll be as brief as possible. So I need a mover and a seconder for the motion that council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls, as provided in section 2392C of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, move into a closed meeting to discuss an acquisition disposition of land. Moved by Councillor Maguire, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. All those in favor? Thank you. And we again ask for your patience.
Yeah. I didn't know. I was, nothing had come through, so I didn't think it was tonight. But it won't long. Carl just called. Carl Grinke.
Oh, yeah.
Can you show my glasses? I'm not asking you for issues. Oh, they sit there in camera right now. Stupid Zoom meetings. Could be.
I'm just asking our third-party live stream to remove the screen so we can count back in. Okay, so Councillor McGuire has his camera off. However, we are ready to go back in. So Councillor Alford, if you're ready, I'll count us in and then you can proceed with the rise and report.
Sure.
Okay, so we will go back in live. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you for your patience. Council has concluded its discussion in camera in closed session, and the rise and report is that council gave direction to staff for next steps with regard to acquisition disposition of land. So if that business is behind us now, we'll proceed with priority issues. The first being 8.1 Municipal Heritage Committee Properties of Interest, and Senior Planner Grenke, if you could join us and guide us through your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening to committee and members of the public, as well as to Dorothy Hudson and Tony Humphrey. I'm very pleased to introduce the Chair of the Municipal Heritage Committee, Dorothy Hudson, and as well as Tony Humphrey, who are going to be presenting a report on the municipal properties of interest. And one of the key mandates of the Municipal Heritage Committee, as set out in their terms of reference, is to research, identify, and advise council on properties that are part of the Municipal Heritage Registry. And I know that the MHC has been working very hard. Well, for many years, we've presented a number of these proposals over the past, and I'm delighted that to have them back here this evening to present on a number of other properties, potential properties of interest. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll just ask that it be teed up, and then I'm going to share the stage with Dorothy and Tony, who will be presenting the report. Thank you.
I trust you can see that okay, Carl? Is that okay now?
I can, yes. So.
And who's going to be speaking to this, Carl, yourself or?
Oh, sorry, I believe that that Mr. Humphrey will be speaking
Okay.
to this.
Welcome, Tony and Dorothy, both. I won't be able to see you when you're speaking because we've got this on our screen. So please, the floor is yours, Tony.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little ill prepared for this. I failed to connect the dots and see it was tonight. So are you on there as well, Dorothy?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so do you want to bring it up to the first?
Yeah, and if you want to just say next slide, please, then Nadine will advance the slides as you need them to be.
Okay. Nadine?
Yeah, I have your slides up there, Tony. I hope you can see them okay.
No, all I have is proposed properties of interest.
Okay, so, oh, sorry.
Okay.
There's your next slide.
Okay, 23 to 29 Becker Street North. This is one of the escape the destruction by fire, the fate of what happened to many of the buildings in Smith Falls. This is, it was kind of a misquote on here. It's not part of Millionaires Row, which is of course on Chamber Street. Originally, it was owned by James Shaw. The building predates the 1856 assessment records as one of the oldest existing buildings in Smith Falls. It has housed the merchant continually, often tenants of the owners. The Bell Telephone Company was listed as the upper floor tenant in 1899, 1905. In 1914, it was A.B. Scott Dry Goods and Made Order Clothing business occupied on the premises. Can we go up again, please, Nadine? Main Street East. That's 4 to 6 Main Street East. The stone building was named the Apothecary's Hall, housed the oldest established business in town, built by John Jr. and James McGilvery in 1871. They expanded the retail business, which started in 1860, in the corner building where the Clark and Lewis building now stands on the corner of Beckwith and Main Street. The property on which the McGilvery block stands belongs in 1856 to John McGilvery, Sr., who is registered as a shoemaker. The McGilvery Brothers business, which sold dry goods, groceries, and furnishing, was later taken over by Coombs Brothers, John and Harry Coombs, who were nephews of the McGilvery Brothers. It later became known as, probably it is today, as the Coombs Building. Next one, please, Nadine. The Union Bank. This is really an amazing building. It has that wonderful window upstairs in it. It was the Union Bank. I think the Union Bank was taken over by the Dominion Bank, which of course became the Toronto Dominion Bank. If you look directly at that building, you'll see on the left side of it, there's a very small store there. That was actually the carriageway into the backyard. It's a very unusual building, built in 1886 as a branch of the Union Bank. Of note is a rounded window, like I said, on the second floor windows. The ornate brickwork that separates the buildings from the adjoining neighbors. Some of it has been a little bit covered up, but most of the brickwork is still there. The McGilvery block, 4 to 6 Main Street East, and the J.D. Lamb store built at 16 Main Street East. That's a very, very unique building, and very few know that it actually was a bank at one time. The third building, constructed of stone, along with the McGilvery block brackets, the brick Union building in the middle, created a heritage streetscape. R.J. Lamb, a tailor, arrived from Scotland in 1841 and owned the property in the 1860s. His son, J.D. Lamb, a merchant and tailor, had inherited the property and built the store. He is still listed as the owner in 1925. At some point, it became known as the Foster and Graham store. Lambs, by the way, could be a relation of Agnes Lamb, who you'll hear which, if you follow what's been going on in the Keyhole House on Brockle Street, Agnes Lamb was the second owner of the Keyhole House. Can we go on the next one, please, Nadine? 4 and 16 Main Street East. Although these three buildings were constructed over a period of several years, they share common features such as the rounded window heads, ornate brackets and the cornices, and the contrast of the different tones of brick and stone. The visual impact of the unique roofline created by the three buildings was lessened by the removal of the mansard roof, which originally topped the McGilvery block. But even so, it stands out as a heritage feature of our downtown. Yeah, you can see that beautiful window. That I've always wanted to go up there and have a look at that, looking at that apartment itself. It's such a gorgeous building. Next one, please, Nadine. 21 Market North, the Armory. It was originally built in 1931. It was called the Chalmers Building and belonged to Frost and Wood. And that is one of two Frost and Wood buildings that are still left in town. The other one, of course, being up at the north end. By 1937, the property housed the Clark and Lewis Ford dealership. It was put up for sale in 49 and sold in 1950 by Frost and Wood to the Crown. The Corporal's Guard from Kingston took possession and converted it into an armory. It was used by the Royal Canadian Dragoons until 1960 to train local militia and march and handle weaponry. It may have been called the Armory when Frost and Woods began manufacturing for World War II. Within the building is a ramp used to drive vehicles onto the upper level, which was presumably where they could be loaded with military equipment that had been stored there. Yeah, that's one theory. It could have also been used for the Frost and Wood when it was the Ford dealership. Not Frost and Wood, excuse me, Clark and Lewis's. Next one, please, Nadine. the former Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. We had that come up before. That's very recognizable by those amazing tombstone windows on the second floor. It was constructed for the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce in 1913. And this building was designed by Victor Daniel Horsborough, a Scottish-born architect. He was appointed architect to the Canadian Bank of Commerce in 1910. And over the ensuing years, he designated numerous branches of offices following the bank's specifications, which typically included small communities, accommodations for the manager, very much like the CIBC was. The balanced facade, large roof, and generous fenestrations are characteristics of Edwardian classicalism. Also typical of the style is the interruption of the brick exterior finished by contrasting stone string courses and lintels that span the apertures. Of note is the brick's Flemish bond. 2 Russell Street. Yeah, this is the old CIBC. Beautiful, beautiful building. 7 Russell West, Davison's Courtyard. What do I, HA Dev, okay. I'll go off course with this one. The building, 7 Russell Street West, the original little stone house in the front, we think was built around 1865. We believe the first baker there was named Baker. So he would have been Baker the Baker. He had 1 beehive oven in the backyard. When Joshua Davidson bought it, it was in the 1890s. HA, his name was Joshua. He bought it in the 1890s and he expanded it to the second beehive. Joshua died, I think, around 1905, and his son Milton took it over. Really, the bakery really flourished under Milton. The beehives came down, of course, Smith Falls, when it was in the midst of the boom. The CPR had moved in, and he built the square building on the back with the adjoining, there was an adjoining a buggy house between them. Milton died, I think, in 1952, and his son Forrest took it over then and ran it right up until 1997. Of course, with note, when Milton rebuilt it, he built a coal-fired oven instead of a wood-fired. And to note that the coal dust and the dough really didn't work that well together. At one time, it was the largest bakery in Eastern Ontario, and right up until Forrest, he quit in 1997. He was being asked by Westons to keep it on. It's one of the longest single-family businesses that were in Smith Falls.
Thank you, Tony. Is that, oh, there's the picture of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You see the little red building on the little stone place. That is the original brick building that was built in the mid 60s, 1860s. The family lived upstairs and the store was downstairs.
Thank you. Could you, Nadine, could you stop sharing the screen so I can see my colleagues? Thanks, Tony and Dorothy, for coming. All of this is fascinating to me, and I know to the people who are watching, and it's always a passion for several of us on council to learn the history of some of these places. It's wonderful. With that said, what staff is asking, what the MHC is asking us for, is to adopt a resolution to add the 8 properties that Tony's just gone through to the municipal register of properties of interest. And I'm just going to quickly say, does anyone have any objections to any of those 8 properties going on the properties of interest list? Are there any objections? I doubted that we would see any objections to that. With that said, then, are there any specific questions of either Carl or Dorothy or Tony with regard to moving this forward? Does anybody need any additional information? then I think it's quite clear that this Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd just like to welcome Dorothy to our meeting. I think it's your first council meeting, and Dorothy's a real workhorse behind the scenes. She's done so much for the town of Smith Falls through the Municipal Heritage Committee. She's chaired now. This is her second term as chair. And I just want to give a big thanks to Dorothy because she's one of those people working hard behind the scenes and doesn't always get credit. So welcome to our meeting and thank you very much.
I'm very glad that you said that, Chris, because, well, Dorothy, your reputation has preceded you, so we feel like we've already discussed some of this stuff with you before. Thanks very much, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And far be it from me, I'm not a historian. I'm interested. I love the presentation, and the historians in the group probably know this already, but I do note that 2 of these buildings were former banks. And I discovered over the years that the banks themselves have an archive like you wouldn't believe. And many of them have like 5 or 6 full-time archivists. So if you did indeed not know that, they will provide you with much more information on those buildings if you require it. But I'm sure you're well aware of that already, but I wanted to flag it.
Thank you. Dorothy and Tony, again, appreciate your always educating us and the people who are watching on the wonderful past that we have in our town and your efforts in particular from the MHC to preserve those assets. So I think the direction is quite clear, Carl, that council is fully supported, unanimously supportive of moving these 8 properties onto the list. Dorothy, did you want to say something?
Well, yes, I'd just like to thank everybody very much for your attention. And I'd also like to thank you for acting promptly to list 11 Market Street South, which was the 8th property that we had researched for this round of properties of interest. We also hope that the research we've done on the history of these properties will help inform the Heritage Conservation District area study. So a little less work for them to do that we've already covered. And thank you again.
And thank you both for coming. And Carl, you have the direction from council that you need. Thanks again. And I think we'll move on then to the next, which is 8.2, which CIP funding, which Mr. Grenke will steer us through again for 55 to 59 Beckwith Street North. The rest of us would think it was on Russell Street, but it in fact has a different civic address. So Carl, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one will be quick. Staff are bringing forward a recommendation from the Community Improvement Plan Evaluation Committee. The council adopts a bylaw authorizing the execution of a funding agreement with Julie Bowman to provide just under $750 in the form of a Program 1 CIP grant. So this comes out of and uses most of the remaining small reserve that was carried forward in the CIP, the previous CIP reserve, and this would fund a 12 square foot fascia sign and a projecting sign for the Revive Hair Studio that's on Russell Street, but yes, with that civic address on Beckwith. Both signs are in accordance with the town sign bylaw. The CIP committee, in their evaluation of the application, also recommended that that installation be included within that. It is an eligible expense, so the recommended cost reflects the cost of the sign plus the installation, or the 50% of which is what is eligible to be funded under the CIP. So, as a very small Program 1, approval was delegated to the CIP evaluation committee. However, the bylaw to authorizing the execution of the funding agreement does need to be passed by council, and that is the recommendation of the committee that this proceed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Grenke. Any questions, concerns, or do we move this forward? Thumbs up all around, Carl. That was an easy one, up and down. Okay, and staying with us then, 8.3 for 188 Chambers Street zoning amendment application. Carl, can you walk us through that one again?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Staff are bringing forward for committee's consideration a proposed zoning amendment application for 188 Chambers Street, and that's located at the eastern end of the street adjacent to and overlooking where the collector road passes under the rail subway leading out of town. The property is currently zoned light industrial with a special exception limiting the size of the industrial operation and has historically been used for a number of different things, including a fire station and more recently a contractor's establishment. The new owners, Lanark County Housing Corporation, proposed to rezone the property to a residential type 4 zone to accommodate a multi-residential use with 5 bachelor and 1 bedroom units. The county would continue to own the building and the 5 units would be affordable rent geared to income. The zoning seeks approval for the land use itself. It is not contingent on the 10-year ownership or rental of the units. The Planning Advisory Committee hosted the public meeting on April 28th, and the committee heard from 2 local residents, 1 in favor and 1 in opposition to the application. The resident in opposition to the application also provided written feedback, which is attached to the report. Staff and the committee also considered feedback from several departments and agencies. The primary concern associated with this development at the end of the street is evident based on a site visit, and that is the adequacy of road and services to the property. Before being in position to make a recommendation to council on the principle of the development, planning staff worked with the Public Works Department and proponent to explore ways in which safe access and turnaround can be provided with the relatively narrow road allowance and respecting the constraints of the site. Ultimately, an arrangement was agreed to in principle, showing a turnaround area which would be administered through an easement through the site plan process and was deemed by the Public Works Department to be adequate given the relatively limited volume of traffic on the road, even post-development, and an improvement over the current condition. And there are some details that will still need to be negotiated through the site plan process, including a request that the applicants have made for the municipality to contribute to the cost of some of the work past that second driveway, and that work is ongoing. Through the planning process, noise, potential environmental concerns, serviceability, and compatibility were considered and addressed in greater detail in the report. The Planning Advisory Committee adopted a motion in favor of the zoning application, subject to addressing public and committee concerns to the satisfaction of the Public Works. The recommendation considered the density of the development and neighboring uses and found that a limited residential development would, in a way, complete the neighborhood, be compatible with its residential neighbors, and integrate better with the existing community than some of the uses and development permitted according to current zoning. For instance, the residential use would likely be easier on the road than some which would be or could be associated with an industrial use that potentially uses trucks on a more regular basis. The recommendation is that a residential type 4 special exception be approved with 3 minor exceptions to accommodate the development concept. A holding provision is also proposed that would tie into the site plan approval and implement on and off-site infrastructure development improvements, including the road, accommodating the environmental process, which would be reviewed by our solicitor, and accommodating noise and vibration study recommendations into a site plan approval. The wording of the proposed holding provision has been reviewed and is satisfactory to the applicant. And if the zoning is approved by council, this plus other site plan details would be addressed in tandem as we review and finalize the site plan application. Finally, planning staff would like to express our appreciation to the applicants for their investment in the town, the public for their feedback, as well as the work of the planning committee and my colleagues in other departments for their efforts on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions, concerns for Mr. Grenke? Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I support this, and Madam Chair and I were at the meeting, and this is sort of the location is sort of out of the way. I was sort of surprised that it was zone industrial, and residential fit. It makes sense. And I know that we had some concerns expressed from residents, but I think that those will be addressed at the site plan as Carl had mentioned there. So I'm fully supportive of this.
Thank you. Mayor Panko.
Thank you. I too am fully supportive, and with I think over 700 people on the wait list for Lanark County Housing, most of the demand is for 1-bedroom units. These will be suitable for 1 or 2 people. Every unit is barrier free, and to my understanding, 2 of the units will be fully enabled for people who rely on a wheelchair with suitable showers and counter heights and things like that. So I think it's a great development. There'll be all the buffering will be in place. Everything we need to make sure this is a safe and comfortable environment will be in place. And to Councilor Brennan's point, I think it's a great location. Take advantage of it, put it into use for housing at a time we really need it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Certainly, I was supportive at Planning Advisory, and I am still supportive. So it doesn't appear that we have any objections to moving this forward. So Carl, you have your direction as well from council.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You've 3 in a row, Carl, so you're good. You're good now. So moving on with that one, we'll go to the procedural bylaw update report with Director Costello.
Thank you. Report 2022-87 was submitted to all of you last week. I hope you've had a chance to do at least a quick review. At the beginning of the report, I simply summarized the decisions that council made a couple weeks ago at our last committee of the whole when this was discussed. We are working on some of those items. One, looking at the student counselor program was one item that we're doing some research on. The other item that I wanted to bring to council's attention is one that I did forget to add to this, but it was a question that was brought up during our last discussion, and that was regarding the audio-visual requirements or the audio-visual setup in the in-camera meeting room. So I'm glad to confirm that our in-camera meeting room will be set up in the same format as our council chambers will be, so that we would be able to conduct hybrid sessions in camera if that's something that council chooses to do. So I wanted to make sure I updated you on all of that, since it was something I did forget to put into the report. So a couple of the items that we wish to bring forward this evening for discussion was the hybrid meeting option. At the last meeting, council decided that they would like to incorporate some form of hybrid meeting into the procedural bylaw. There was 3 outstanding questions that council asked staff to go back and do some research on. One being if members have to be physically present to count as quorum. The second regarding establishing a time period to allow for virtual participation or e-participation. And the third is if we would allow virtual participation during closed sessions. To that end, I reached out to all my colleagues in various Ontario municipalities, and Appendix A attached to the report outlines the responses that I received from each one of those. The recommendations, the staff recommendations coming out of all of those regarding the issue of quorum would be that if council decides that members would be included as quorum when they are participating electronically. The second question regarding a time period for e-participation, the staff recommendation is that no time period be established for e-participation in meetings. And regarding e-participation during closed sessions, the recommendation from staff is that members be permitted to participate in closed sessions electronically. And the other item that I added that I thought was a nice touch that some municipalities did was that any members who are participating electronically in a closed session must attest to the fact that they recognize that they will be in a closed session and are able to ensure confidentiality. I recognize that that was brought up at the last meeting. We discussed this as well. Item number 2 in the report was the role of the acting mayor that was brought up. Council wanted to change that. I did confirm that is actually part of Robert's Rules of Order. I would like to bring up actually as well that this provision is during a council debate, not when we're having our committee of the whole debates. So this would be when a motion is on the floor that the acting chair would have to relinquish the role and ask in our case, the previous acting mayor or acting chair to take over the chair so that he can make comment on the question on the floor. So keep in mind, this is for council meetings, not committee of the whole, where we just have general discussions about items. So as the staff recommendation for that is that we leave that provision in as it deals with council meetings. And I think the concern was that it deals with debate during committee of the whole. The third item was something that Councillor McGuire had brought up regarding reducing the age limitation in our boards and committees. As council is aware, we have a policy for committee and board appointments as well as an application process. And it currently falls the Municipal Act regarding 18 years of age, Canadian citizen, same requirements that we require from an elector or someone to run for municipal council. The recommendation coming out of that is if staff or if council wishes staff to research that, we could go and get a legal opinion. We feel that if there's certain boards or committees that council would like to reduce the age limitation on, we as staff, we know which committees council would be interested in, as there's a possibility that we'd have to look at all the terms of reference for those committees to allow a youth member on them. And the fourth item that we brought up and we did some research on was the consent reports and agendas. What we're looking to do, so as you know, a council or a consent report council agenda is one that is very common, one that we don't anticipate any debate, that is very routine in nature. Some of the examples that I could pull from my memory from recent events would be our banking permissions, as well as any policies mandated by the province or federal government. One that recently was enacted was the disconnecting from work policy, which was mandated under Bill 27, and an execution of funding agreements. Those are just some examples. What we're looking to add under the committee of the whole is CAO consent reports. So these would be reports that staff would draft for council to read for their edification, but they would be under a heading CAO consent reports, where the report would be available for committee for council members to read. Again, they'd be routine in nature, and they could easily be passed just by a verbal motion without any debate. Again, some of the examples are listed above. The one that I know council is most interested in is having a consent agenda at our council meetings. And this again is for routine items. They'd be put under one heading. Again, under both reports and the agendas, council is more than welcome to pull any item out of that listing. If there's an item that you want to discuss and it's in the consent listing, you are free to pull that out without debate. As well, if staff are aware or if somebody declares a conflict of interest, it also gets pulled and debated separately. So we're looking at adding those, one under committee of the whole reports and one under our council agenda. I also in the report outline how that would be introduced by motion if council wants to review that. So those were the main items that came out of the last committee of the whole. If council wishes, if has any questions or seeks further clarification, I will try my best to answer some questions.
Well, I think we're going to get some opinions here right away. Councillor McGuire, you first.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Director Costello. I really appreciate how we're going through this kind of chunk by chunk, and they're nice manageable pieces, because I have to say I still kind of get that, I don't know, feeling when I see it on the agenda, but the last two, these have been great. I support all the recommendations as outlined in the analysis and options of the report. One thing I'd like to comment on is is reducing the age. I think I still don't support the student counselor program. I think no matter how much research goes into that program, it's not going to change the fact that these student counselors are going to have a very limited voice. They're never going to have a vote, and we're asking them to sit through 2 to 3 hours in meetings when their contribution to the discussion is always going to be limited in that way. I think it's much more meaningful for them to play a role on a committee that they can vote on, and I'd really like to see us follow through on Director Costello's recommendation that we get a legal opinion. My preference would be to lower the age to 14. I think we've had some student counselors in grade 9 that showed they were mature, competent, ready to contribute. So I think grade 9, 14 years old is very fair and reasonable. The two exceptions I would take to this are the Planning Advisory Committee and the Police Services Board, but I would like to see what our legal opinion is on adding 14 and up to all other committees. I think this would be especially advantageous for the Accessibility Committee, potentially the Heritage Committee, and our advisory committees. So interested to hear what our committee's consensus is on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGuire. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I appreciate the report, Director Costello. A question on the virtual meetings or hybrid meetings. Again, I did reach out to 2 residents and ask them what they thought. This came up at County Council as well. For those of us who have been working with this model for a couple of years, we see the benefits. It can work very effectively. And I think for a lot of people who work from home and have had that opportunity, they recognize that there are new ways of doing business and they appreciate it. But there is a significant perception out there that if you're not, let's say, around the horseshoe or in the meeting, you're not at work. I've heard that. I've heard it from council colleagues. The broader public who's not had the chance to work this way and are, I won't say firmly entrenched, they're much more used to seeing council sit around looking each other in the eye and having a debate or a conversation. So with that said, I wondered if council would be open to getting some public input or feedback on that particular topic, just to see. My sense is that there is a perception that, again, if you're sitting at home, you're not at work, which we know isn't true. But again, the broader public, I'd like to do some work around that, and I'd be interested in seeing if there was what the public has to say about that. I'm open to Councillor Maguire's suggestion of getting an opinion on the age for the committees that he's identified. And on the consent agenda, I've worked with them quite a bit in the past. And I think if we do adopt it, again, it makes our meetings more efficient. Council the assumption is we've read our reports. We are going in well-informed to advance the consent agenda. But the other purpose of going through those reports is not for us or our convenience, but for the public to really understand and unpack some of those complicated reports. And I assume that it would be every one of us and future council's responsibility to ask for a report to be pulled so that you could have that discussion. So I do worry a little bit. I view part of our role is to help the public. We spend a lot of time reading these and doing this business, and part of our job is to make sure that the public understand how and why we make these decisions, why those staff reports are so critical in guiding council's decisions. So I wouldn't want to lose unpacking of those. So I wouldn't want to see consent reports just get rubber stamped all the time. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I support staff recommendation on each one of these. I'll speak to them. On the hybrid meetings, and I think I said this last time, of course, everyone wants to be together and debate, and we're going to have a new council chamber. So exciting. But the point that I was trying to make last time was I have 2 colleagues here that I'm looking at, both work. One has children. I want to see people run for council and know that they have an opportunity to participate in council. And I know that anybody that runs expects to go, but if circumstances come up and they need to have an opportunity to do this, we have the technology to do it. I've seen the list that Carrie produced, and thank you for that. And the majority of municipalities, I think, agree. So I'm certainly in support of staff recommendation on that. Number 2, I'm fine with keeping in tune with Robert's rules. On the committees, I have to disagree. I think that, and I am a big supporter of the student counselor program. I think at an age of 14, if you're interested, be a student counselor. And we're talking about, even if it's the Municipal Heritage Committee, I agree. Certainly not the Police Services Board or the planning committee, but on committees where we're making decisions about our recommendations to council on matters of policy, there needs to be, I think, a degree of maturity there. So I'm really hesitant on that one. I think we should leave it as it is. And on the consent agenda, I understand what Peter's saying, but the fact of the matter, the consent agenda is published publicly. The reports are on there, and really, it's really like the examples Carrie gave us are prime examples that, you know, for instance, the being able to shut off work, that's mandated. It has to be done, and that was just something we had to do. So if a councillor wants it to bring it forward to if something like that, you think that it needs to be publicly aired, pull it out, and then we'll talk about it. So I'm okay with the consent agenda. In fact, I'm very supportive of it. So those are my comments on the issues of the procedural bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Panko.
Yeah, I support all staff recommendations, and I think we've learned over the last couple of years that we can work very effectively virtually. So a hybrid model, I think, is very suitable. And I think where it works the best even is with our committees and our task forces, et cetera. I think we were able to attract volunteers who can easily tune in from home or from work, where they may need to tune in for a meeting. And I think it's enabled us to get probably broader feedback, more comprehensive feedback and guidance to council because of the ability to participate virtually. Secondly, I guess the other one I just want to comment on is the student counselor role. And I mean, the last couple of years make it difficult to judge a bit about how this can be effective. I'm flexible with age. I'd like to see it continue, but I'm interested in seeing, I guess, a further discussion on this in the future. And it does vary a little bit. We love to have some great participation from youth. But at the same time, I also recognize it's an opportunity for our future leaders. Our future leaders get involved in a way they could not otherwise get involved, and to learn to develop their voice and to have some understanding of civics that they may not have otherwise understood. So I'd like to see it continue, but I think there is opportunity here for some refinement, and we'll see that coming forward in the near future. So I'll support the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Allen or Councillor Dwyer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with all of them. I think the only one that I'm not sure I want to change is the student counselors. We've had student counselors from all the terms I've served on. And I think, like Councillor Brennan, I think it serves a great purpose to have them here at the age that they're coming, because they usually give some insightful opinions on what we're asking them to do. And I think that sometimes it prepares people who are thinking that they might like politics, but have no really idea of how it would work, an opportunity. But like Councillor McGuire, I'm not against changing the age or looking at younger political leaders. I mean, I certainly would be open to that. The consent agenda, I think that if you have people running and they're serious about this job, they're going to know if there's something that's upsetting them, they have questions to ask, that they can pull that aside. And I think the way that Carrie set that up, you're able to do that. So I agree with that one as well. So yeah, no, this is well done, Carrie.
Thank you.
And Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I have no further questions beyond the questions that I asked last week. I'm satisfied with the answers that Director Costello has provided to us, but I do look forward to seeing that final draft of the proposed changes to come back to us, at which point I suspect I may have some additional questions.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just before we move on, I'd like to confirm we've got a consensus to look into the having younger people on committees 14 and up to get that legal opinion. Or
Well, I haven't spoken yet, so I was going to take advantage of
okay,
so, and then I'll come back to you or try to summarize what our consensus was. The hybrid option I wanted to get back to the roots of why we do this. We are public, and we need to be public and transparent and accountable to the people that we serve. And throughout this pandemic, thank goodness we've had the option to do Zoom. And I think it is something that we will continue to see. I'm not as sold on having, I like the idea of perhaps having some limits on it in terms of how many meetings, because why are we doing this? And we haven't asked our public what they want. And those are the people we serve. We haven't done a Speak Up Smiths Falls to say, hey, what are your thoughts on these things? So I would feel much more comfortable if I had some idea of what the public that we are serving and that we are trying to transmit all the information that we deal with to think of the idea. And that is not something we have done. So I would prefer to see the public consulted about this because it potentially is a fairly big change. It's not, all of this is not just about council. This is about the public too. So that's what I would like to see. I'm glad, Carrie, that you clarified, because I was going to have some problems if you were going to do giving up the chair during committee, and it was not clear to me in your document that it was only council. I'm okay with that and going with Robert Rules of Order. In terms of, I like councillors, I think I agree with Councillor McGuire's take on this, is that I think that the youth of our town have more, could have some real impact on some of our committees and the recommendations that come forward to council. I have not in the 4 years found the student counselor program all that effective in terms of they are limited into the participation that they can have. They don't have a vote. I think I could be on board with dropping it to 14, but I would also like to see some pathway here. Do we still elect student counselors at the high schools? Because if we do, those would most likely be the people that we should see participating on our committees. Those will be the future leaders in not just their school, but potentially our town. So I have some different thoughts. The consent agendas and reports, again, I go back to who are we serving here? What is most understandable for them to follow? I see what the consensus is, so my arguments against will be for naught. But I do think in a couple of these issues that we haven't asked the people we serve what they need from us. And I'm going to suggest to my colleagues that before this is completely finalized, that we ask them what they would like us to do or what they would like to see council do in now and in the future. So I'm going to take Councillor McGuire, did you got in everything you wanted to get in? Okay, then I'll try to summarize, because it appears, and I'll go backwards here. It appears that we have consensus to move forward with consent reports and agendas. We're still a little iffy on the role of acting mayor. Now that Carrie has clarified that, that's an easy one. It's Robert Rules of Orders at council, that's fine. It would appear that there is no limitation at this point in time from my colleagues and the consensus that we go full virtual. There is no cap on anything. And I see a yes from Chris, Councillor McGuire. I see a yes from Councillor Brennan. Anybody else want to give full on no for Mayor Panko? So that's 3. Okay, that carries. That I'm assuming Councillor Dwyer is feeling the same. So so that's it then. We're going fully towards the virtual. There is no limitations whatsoever on participating in council at either council or committee, and staff will proceed with putting those processes in place. I will again, I object. And with regard to the student counselor program, it appears that there is also consensus to change virtually nothing. Yes, Councillor McGuire.
Just distinguishing between the student councilor program and the committee potential program.
Right. So what I saw during the discussion is that there was an appetite for us to continue with the student counselor program. I didn't see that we had a lot of talk about adding youth to the committee level. Mayor Panko.
Yeah, so I guess two things. One, if it's legally possible, I don't see an issue having a 14 or 15-year-old participate on some committees, and it's ultimately future council's decisions as to who will populate the committees. And I think to Councilor McGuire's point, the accessibility committee is an example. If we had a young person who wishes to join that committee and has some lived experience that would be very relevant, I think it's important that we would be willing to accommodate that. So I'd like to get opinion back on that. And the second thing, just to mention, I support, Madam Chair, your recommendation that if committee of the whole supports this tonight, that we take a couple of weeks to post it on our website, I guess, and allow for the community to provide feedback.
Okay, so I want to, so Mayor Panko and I think that there should be some feedback on this hybrid option. Okay, so we have consensus. Staff, can you do some work to get some opinions from our public on how they feel about the hybrid option? Right now, the consensus is that we be fully engaged in hybrid. Sorry, Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Just point, and it's a point I made last week as well. I mean, if, for the benefit of the public, the types of discussion that we're having at this point is local policy. So while we are making a decision on what we're adopting under a procedural bylaw, it's something that we could change in the future should we wish to do so. So if we find out that the virtual conduct of these meetings is no longer beneficial to the town or our constituents, then we can certainly look at revisiting the policy and writing it out or changing it to something that's more flexible or better defined.
You did, and you made the point last week that the public would have their say at every election about that. I don't think we should wait for the 4 years to find out whether or not it was working.
Madam Chair, I think you've misunderstood me. I don't mind the idea of consultation now. By all means, please do it. But just to point that this is a policy that's flexible as council chooses to.
Okay, thank you. So the last, Councillor Dwyer, or Councillor, sorry, McGuire.
I don't feel that we have a need to have consultation right now. I think that the survey that Director Costello did with the other municipalities shows that this is widespread. This is it's becoming the new way of doing business. I'd much rather see it played out, and if there's problems, we can solve the problems. I know we're coming into the summer vacation season, staff are incredibly busy, and this term of council is running out. So I really want to see this policy move forward, and I feel like this is going to create more work. When a lot of homework's been done already to this point, I'm ready to move forward with it. So I just want to voice that before we move on.
Okay, and Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're into June. We've put a lot of stuff on staff's plate. I'm ready to make the decision. I can be judged in October should I run. And I don't need to I make my decision on what I think is right. I want council to be inclusive. I want to encourage people to run, and that'll be my line. But I don't feel a need to do that at this point. I mean, we've done that before. We've gotten public opinion before, and oftentimes we don't follow it. So I think that's an exercise in futility.
A bit of a surprise, seeing as how you have always been very much to get the public's opinion, but that's fine. So Councillor Mayor Panko, myself are the only two, it appears, that want to consult the public. So that being said, then prior to this, on the policy, then we'll move forward. And the last one that we have to just make sure we nail here is the student counselor program. And I don't see consensus for lowering the age to 14. That's not at least what I've heard. Councillor McGuire's gonna correct me. Go ahead.
So my understanding is the student counselor program is at 14. Like there's two separate things, right? We've got the student counselor program that we're debating, and then there's opening this up to committees. Now, opening this up to committees, the suggested age in the report was 16. I'm saying make it grade 9, make it 14. We've had some great 14-year-old student counselors, if my memory's right. We've had at least grade 10, so under 16. But it's two different things here, so I just want to make sure that's differentiated.
Okay, so the committees and lowering the age to 14, the terms of reference would have to be changed. And is everyone okay with that part of it? Can I see thumbs up? Committees, 14 years old, terms of reference, including the youth. Okay. As far as the student counselor program it goes at council, I think we wanted to pretty much continue as we have in the past. That was the consensus I heard during the discussion. Agree? Give me some thumbs up if I've stated it correctly. I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So it looks like there will be little or no change to the student counselor program at council, but we want to add something to that, Carrie, in terms of adding a youth component to some of the committees, changing their terms of reference, and allowing 14-year-olds, once you've checked it with legal, on it. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, now we're going to get to another potentially interesting subject matter, and that is the festivals and events policy, and that is with our manager, Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to committee. The report before you is with regards to the events policy. Staff brought this policy to to committee December 13th, 2021. There was feedback from committee to further engage the events community. So we did. We had some public consultation. We also drafted an application and a guide to bring forward at this meeting for council's consideration, review, and feedback. So the policy itself had very little changes, minor changes based on that additional feedback that we heard from public consultation. The big portion this time is really that guide and the application as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments, and definitely open for council's feedback if there are changes to either of these documents. I can definitely include some of those changes. You just have to email them.
Okay, and I saw Councillor Dwyer's hand up first.
Thanks. Julie, I went through all the documents that were appended to the staff report, and I do have a couple questions. My first question was with regard to the financial impact of implementing this policy. And I can appreciate that in your staff report, it projected that there would be no cost associated with implementing the policy. But then we're also talking about having a staff person dedicated to walking people through the implementation of the policy. So I'm wondering, for the fullness of transparency, if you can give us an idea of kind of what the dedication of that person is going to be to implementing this. Is it equivalent to a half FTE, or is it somebody that we're going to have on a part-time basis and seasonal capacities when we're seeing an influx of these events? Like how are we managing that?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. Really, this process will streamline the process that's currently happening. Right now, event organizers have to go to individual staff in different departments in order to receive approvals and get comments for their event. So this will be streamlined specifically through the tourism and culture coordinator. So Lisa over at Heritage House will spearhead the initiative once it's in place. She will intake all of the applications and then send them out to all of the staff and different departments to get those approvals and comments, and liaison and coordinate specifically between departments as well as the event organizers. So in high season, between January and March, when event organizers are planning their event, there's going to be more demand from staff. And then through the other months when events are already taking place and they've already been planned, then there's little commitment for staff time. So to answer your question, I guess specifically, we're probably looking at, a part-time position at this point. And that's why we made changes at the staff level and in our department in order to accommodate this.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up question to that would be, or perhaps it's more of a comment really, is that, I'm not quite sure that's a service level that I was prepared as council to accept for the municipality. I think the hiring and fulfillment of that position probably came a little bit before the cart, and given that Lisa's already in this capacity and it's something that, will relate to other aspects of her job, I get that, but I think that there's probably a better way that we could have had that discussion rather than having it kind of come at this point when the policy is, in its end stages of adoption. My other takeaway when I read through the accompanying documents is that, I can appreciate that the idea is to reduce red tape and forego any potential cost to the applicant to undertake this sort of special event permit. But then when I started to actually go through the additional costs and the additional applications that are necessary, that's where, I think if this proposal really is going to be successful, it really should be kind of like an umbrella approach where rather than filing for your separate building permit and your fire permit and applying for security separately through police services, and understanding that, the role of the coordinator is to kind of be there to facilitate. I think it makes more sense to have that all actually done through the one application instead of saying, this is your free application. Plus, by the way, I need $300 for your building permit per structure, because it's a little bit misleading. So I don't know if you've got thoughts on how we can better kind of consolidate this even further so that it is indeed actually, less red tape, because when I read what's been produced at this point, it's really just another process on top of all of the other processes that you actually have to do.
So we've looked to try and streamline some of those. So for instance, through community services and the parks rental or the facility application, we've incorporated that into the new application. So they don't have to do an application with us and then go to community services and fill out a facilities rental application. But there are some applications that are very specific to specific events that are happening in a certain event. And that's why those applications or those documents are separate, but we are trying to, as part of this process, to let those departments know that this application is coming forward so that we can work with them. And the intention is to provide all of these additional applications along with the consultation process. So, and there's different fees associated with those that this event policy can't change. So if we don't want to charge, applicants a building permit, that's something that council has to set forth and put in policy, that as part of an events application, they don't have to pay for a building permit if they're going to have a large tent. That's, I think, be above and beyond this scope. And some of those outside organizations we don't have control over, but we still need to make sure we're doing our due diligence as the town. For instance, liquor licensing and health unit approvals and everything. We don't control that process or those fees, but we need to make sure that our event organizers who are putting on events on town property are getting those things. And that's what the event policy does. And that's what the application process does.
Okay, thank you, Julia. I think at this point, I'm not supportive of adopting this policy as presented for the very reasons I've just listed. I don't think it's a good use of our staff time. I think it duplicates staff involvement in this process. I get the liaison role. I think that's, in theory, a good idea. But when I looked at the implementation that's proposed at this point, I didn't see that as being the actual benefit, just more staff time or more people with their fingers on the files. That combined with the fact that really, it's an additional application on top of applications that they already have to file. I don't see there being the benefit that I think we were hoping to achieve with this policy. So for those reasons, I'm not supportive of it as presented.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Crowder. I think it incorporates a lot of the feedback from our last session. I've got a few questions and a few ideas. The first is with transient traders under 3.26, it says that they'll be exempt from licensing provisions of the bylaw. Is there any provisions of the business licensing bylaw that would apply or that they would have to worry about outside of this events policy?
So we do have a under the refreshment vehicle bylaw, food carts and other transient traders or one-time setups for those types of things. So because it's under the umbrella of an event, they are part of the event application and wouldn't have to go through that different process if they were just looking to set up a food cart on the side of the road.
Great, thanks for that. With the insurance, I'm wondering, are there municipalities out there, and maybe CO Morris, if you wanted to weigh in too, that provide umbrella coverage for groups that want to do small events just to take away that hurdle of going, or is there any examples of that in Ontario anyway?
Through the chair, that's something we looked at, and I might refer this to Director Costello. I know we looked at it at one point, and if memory serves, we ran into a few barriers in terms of implementing it. So, Carrie, do you recall the outcome of that investigation?
Yeah, from what I recall, CAO Morris, is that the insurance they could provide wasn't really adequate for the events that were being held. It wasn't, I'd have to go back into my emails, but the umbrella coverage wasn't sufficient for the types of events that we were looking for it to cover. Now, granted, that was maybe 3 years ago, two or 3 years ago now. Something we can certainly ask our broker about to just for a refresh to see if anything has changed. But from what I can remember of that, it just wasn't something that was going to benefit the events that we were holding at that time.
Any other comments, Councillor McGuire?
I think Director Crowder or Manager Ms. Crowder had her hand up there too on that one.
Yeah, just to follow up, when we took over this process and the policy, Carrie actually did reach out to our insurance company to ask those questions again, and it was the same at that time, where it just doesn't provide that adequate coverage, and it also puts an additional liability on the municipality through the insurance company. What we were able to do, taking feedback from council as well as event organizers, is for general small events, we only require $2 million in liability insurance, where our major events are $5 million in liability insurance. So we were able to kind of switch up and have those two tiers depending on the size of our events. We're not Toronto, we're not a large municipality, so those small events are minor, and so the liability insurance was lower, and so the cost to event organizers are able to be smaller as well.
Great, thanks. It's something I'd love to see if it's affordable. Under 3.1A, it says compliance with section 6 of the accessible standard for customer service training for every provider of goods or services receives training about the provision of its goods and services. And I just want to understand that better. Does that mean that every single person on site needs to go through the training, and what kind of training is it? And just how does that play out in practice?
Through you, Madam Chair. So it's really advising our event organizers, what accessibility requirements are and what some of the provisions and requirements are as part of events, and encouraging them to make our events accessible. So no, not everyone who is at an event or hosting an event would have to go through some specific training. It's staff as part of the concierge process and the application process to provide that information to those event organizers so that they can better understand and provide some of those services and accessibility requirements. It's not something that we govern, but it's something that we want to promote for sure.
Great. I love that it's 3.1 front and center, and there's a lot of really good bullets in that section. My last is on the exemptions. 1.6A, this policy does not apply to events on private property except when funded by the town. Now, if we're entering into funding agreements with organizations to do events on private property, I think the best time to get anything that might not be covered in the funding agreement currently would be when that funding agreement's signed. So I'd much rather see the funding agreement beefed up a little bit than applying a second application and a second application that's got to go through staff's hands and get approval or not approved. But if we've already signed a funding agreement with them and we don't approve the event application, it creates a difficult situation. So I think for events on private property, if we could handle that at the funding agreement stage, I'd love to hear a perspective on that. If there's a reason we couldn't, but suggestion for streamlining there.
Sure. Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So we are looking at potentially updating, the On the Roll program and our community grants program next year, and that's something that we could look at and see incorporating as part of that process. Right now, that's our only way that we can ensure liability is covered for the town if we are funding events. So we don't have a mechanism currently in order to ensure that private events that we are funding have all of their proper, insurance and all their licenses and approval from some of those other outside organizations.
And I saw Councillor McKenna's hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't know if this question is for Ms. Crowder or Director Costello or CEO Morse, but is there another policy that the municipality has that is not an event, but more, I could call it an event, but it's really going to be a protest? I'm going to bring a bunch of my like-minded colleagues from around Ontario to Smith Falls to host a large event. And what it really might turn out to be is a protest. Do we have a separate, if you know where I'm going, is there a application if you wanted to have a protest in the town or a process, or is that considered under event management? I'm just still smarting from recent events in other cities where things that look like they might be, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. It just, do we have a separate one? For Ottawa has certainly protest policies. So I just wondered, how does it separate?
I think I saw CEO Morris's hand go up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Great question. And I think it enters a different realm when we're looking at protests, because peaceful protests are, of course, legal. So we haven't specifically dealt with it in this policy, but if committee would like us to research it, we certainly could. It's difficult to separate, I guess, intent from the actual delivery. The truckers were meant to be peaceful, and it turned into, arguably something different. So. All I'm cautioning is that we have to be very careful that we don't stifle legitimate peaceful protests. So there may be a role for police to be involved in that process in terms of understanding who the event organizers are or who the event organizers are connected with. But to answer your question specifically, we did not consider it as part of this policy.
Yeah, thank you, CEO Morse. And I certainly don't want to, if I have a peaceful protest on a whatever, and I have 100 people and we want to go to the park and hold that, do I need an events permit, or can I just go and do that? I guess, and I don't expect an answer, it's a little rhetorical, but I just needed to perhaps have that considered. Thank you.
Any other, sorry, go ahead, CEO Morse.
Yeah, I appreciate the layers or the importance of that question. So under the policy as drafted, if it's more than 25 people and it's in a public space, then yes, they would need a permit to do that.
Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. So, sorry, and this may become a bit of a hypothetical question, but say there's a semi-organized moms group that goes out with strollers to walk the park, exercise their kids, gather at Lower Reach Park. Maybe they bring a cooler and they have a barbecue. Suddenly it sounds like, they require a permit to gather in the park because they're going to have more than 25 people in attendance. And I think, that to me is kind of the root of why this policy seems to be missing what the original intent was, and I noticed even in one of the pages it referred to charging people to, do a photo shoot in the park. Like, to me, there's no value in that. If somebody wants to, if a local commercial photographer wants to use our beautiful community as a backdrop and take pictures of people along the water, let them, I think this whole thing is just completely overkill.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan. And then Councillor Allen.
I've got to agree with my colleague, Councillor Dwyer. And I know that staff have worked long and hard on this and tried to consult. And I was in on one of the meetings, I think in January. But this is so, and the good point of this is we have a coordinator, Lisa Burden-Bell, who I've talked to many times, who's more than prepared to walk people through this. But just reading it and thinking about, if I was going to do an event, I'd be like, I'm not going to bother. There's just so much in here for someone to get their head around. I know that here's a question I have, that we talked about charging for picnic tables and chairs and that, and I know that's out of there, but we've back-ended it because we're charging them $30 an hour to bring it. The other one, I noticed is, and the insurance is another one. I'd be happy to have a look at how we can umbrella, especially a small event, from a community organization, and they have to jump through the hoops to get $2 million insurance. Why bother? And then, I noticed the tents. If it's a larger tent, you need a building permit. So I got a problem with this. I do. And I know a lot of other people do. I know we need to have something on paper, and I appreciate the work staff have gone in to prepare this and try to make it user-friendly. But user-friendly or not, I don't think it encourages people to want to do stuff.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, no, I agree with Councillor Dwyer and Councillor Brennan. My husband was a Rotarian, and as a wife of a Rotarian, we've done a lot of events, but when that's an aging population, a lot of our groups that are putting on events are older. They're retired, so they're not young. Often they've got ideas that are great and they just come spontaneously, let's do this event. Well, if somebody handed me all of this and my group sat down, it's just so much. And in my opinion, it's just more than we really need them to do. Anyway, no, I can't support it.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor McKenna and then I'll come back to CEO Morris. Go ahead, Councillor McKenna.
No, I think we definitely need a policy like this. The municipality has innumerable risks involved, and this is a gift to organizers. It's not a deterrent. It actually lays out in one place, along with facilitating how to do it, where before they might have had to go to 3 or 4 places or not be clear. They hadn't thought of everything. And I respect that, but community organizers understand that there are rules. So absolutely think we need a policy like this. Maybe we could tweak it, whatever, improve it, but this is the reality of today. I think it's a gift that you're ending it out. Here it is, A to Z, how to do a festival or an event. There it is, with support from our team. We want this to go ahead. So I have a totally opposite view of that.
Thank you. Did you want to make a comment, CEO Morris, and then we'll go to Mayor Panko?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is good feedback, right? Because we went out to stakeholders and we got a lot of feedback from them, and I think one of the take homes from the consultations is the policy itself seems overwhelming because it is intended to cover every circumstance. So in response to that, what Julia and her team did is they put together a 7-page guide. So really, you only have to read the guide. If your event fits into this category, it really narrows down the things you need to consider. So I would just encourage committee to not be overwhelmed by the vastness of the policy because it's meant to cover every situation. If you have a small event, you go to that section and there's a checkbox. The idea of putting, a sort of one window service was really that person, I would refer to them as a navigator to help navigate people through the process. So I wouldn't get concerned about a 25-page policy. I would focus on the 7-page guide that helps people focus on their event and what they need in order to run that event. In terms of really good comments about, a bunch of people gathering, a family gathering in a park, the intent here is not to force those people to get an event permit. So, we could look at raising the threshold. Maybe it needs to be 50 instead of 25, but those are tweaks we can make to the policy. And I think this has been a really good discussion to, make sure it's practical. But the intent here is to protect the interests of the town. If they're on town property, we're responsible for them in some fashion.
Thank you. Good reminder. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor McCann. I mean, it is detailed and it is lengthy, but it has to be comprehensive to hit, I think, all the potential elements of a multitude of events that people may want to apply for. And of course, the simple part is that events of 25 people or less where no alcohol is served or consumed on site is exempt, really. You don't need that special permit. So there may be some tweaking, and to CEO Morris's comment, maybe that could be a little bit larger from a number standpoint. I mean, if someone's going out to do a photo shoot in a park, I don't think there's a need, obviously, for, and I don't think it applies from what I read here, but I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But overall, I appreciate it's detailed, it's lengthy, but I think to CEO Morris's point, the 7-page guide, and of course in the application as well is fairly straightforward and fairly simple. So I can support it, but I'm also open to some of the suggestions that have been made tonight.
And I'm going to go to Councillor McGuire, and then I'm going to make some comments, and then I'll go back to Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McGuire, we're looking for consensus as to, right now I'm tracking that. How are you feeling about the
So yeah, I think
having a festivals and an events policy?
the way I'd like to see this play out in practice is that the staff have a liaison that's the navigator, the problem solver, essentially the wedding planner of stuff for people that, they're going to have that one point of contact that gets consistent communication. So the expectations are clear and they're walked through the process, and they're not the ones solving the problems that are created because of us trying to manage our liability. I'm hearing that there's opportunities to streamline that. I'd like to hear a little bit more, maybe from Councillor Dwyer, of what some of our concrete things we could incorporate into this. I think the application as presented in the guide is a huge improvement from our last discussion. But even myself, I can identify there's issues with our community grant program and this policy not coming together. So I would lean towards, right now I'm supporting Councillor Dwyer, Brennan, and Alan with taking another look.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here for a few minutes. No, I am very supportive of a festivals and events policy. I have been the organizer, as many of you have, but from the perspective of both the organizer and the staff who are asked to respond, whether it be it public works or community services or whatever it is, too often somebody didn't flag for them that they needed 50 picnic tables at 5 o'clock. And then there is a panic. There have been confrontations caused by the fact that both parties didn't know exactly what was required or what they were supposed to do or when they were supposed to do it. And that causes strife amongst and turns off organizers. I can think of, I won't even get into the numbers of times I can think of that has happened, and in recent years as well. So I am very supportive of the festival's events policy. I think staff has done a good job to try and narrow that application down. You've heard the comments tonight from some, and I think that, well, we may not adopt it tonight or be ready to adopt it. I think you've got some additional tweaking that we could do based on the comments that you heard tonight. But I think we would be, we are growing. We want events. We want more and more people from outside our community to come in and run things. And I think we need to be very careful as we are growing and there are more and more events being run, and potentially our small events, yes, but large events as well bring their own set of challenges that I think we need to tweak it some more. There's been a lot of good comments here tonight from my colleagues. But I think we would be very remiss if we didn't go ahead and get a festivals and events policy. And going back to something that Councillor Dwyer said earlier tonight, and that I can appreciate, this is policy. The first time that you run people through this policy, this application process, you're going to identify where your gaps are and what your problems are, and then you can change it. And you should change it. You shouldn't be adverse just because we wrote something out that it can't be flexible enough to adapt on the fly for it, certainly the first few times that you use it. So those are my comments. I want to proceed with this. I do think before we adopt it, though, my colleagues, some of their concerns, questions should be addressed potentially in the policy. And I'll go back, Councillor Dwyer, I think we're gonna try to close this off. So I'll let you have the last word here.
For sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think, I think that there is value in having a festivals and events policy for festivals and events. And I don't think anybody here is in disagreement of that. But I think, the document that's been produced just isn't, in an attempt to try and create some scalability to the requirements, I think what it's done is create a classification for events that probably don't need any amount of oversight at all, and, it makes me think that for a policy like this, where there really aren't any enforcement provisions behind it, it's not like if you have a gathering of moms with strollers in a park and you exceed 25 people, no one's coming out to fine you. Which makes me think that we've got a policy that is redundant and unenforceable, which just kind of leads to greater confusion and no benefit to anybody. So I do look forward to it coming back. I'm hoping that when it comes back, it's something that's scaled to events that are appropriate to requiring municipal oversight. And that it's something that can be a great benefit to those that are organizing these events. Wendy, I gotta say, I was coming out, gangbusters about the fact that the 7-page guide really does simplify an overly complex policy. And that's great, but it almost makes having a staff person redundant. If you have the guide and it's easy to use, you could scale it into a digital platform like City Online that allows you to do it all, and your computer programming walks you through to ensure that all your steps are taken and your contact information and needs are going directly automatically to the service providers that it needs. I think that's the benefit, but I don't know that we need an individual who's there as a liaison to do this.
Well, and again, that's an evolution. These things, as our town evolves, so will all of our processes, and naturally we're going to have to go more digital. Our website, I assume, when it's redone, is going to have some of that capacity where it does not now. So I think the consensus seems to be, Manager Crowder, and CEO Morris, is we want you to take it back and see if you can refine it and bring it back to us again. You have done a lot of work, but you'll never have a panacea for every cure for every scenario. But I think we all are realizing that we have to be more organized, and not just for the organizers. We have to be more organized for our staff, because we place them in untenable positions sometimes by wanting them to react to something that wasn't arranged ahead of time. Councilor McKenna, last word. It looks to me like we have reason to go send this back and staff to refine it. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I don't want to get back into it. I just wondered, are we covered for our existing and current events? I'm concerned about our liability as a corporation. And do we have at least the minimum? Are we covering off our liabilities? Because we're sending this back and forth, there's gaps, and I'm worried about our liability. Are there things in place right now that will protect the corporation and the municipality while we make up our minds?
Okay, CEO Morris, can you answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would say that we're doing the bare minimum of due diligence. This policy will place us in a much more defensible position, so we will bring it back as soon as possible.
Thank you. Okay, two others, last two. One is with our Treasurer Koziel, the Financial Audit Services Award. And if you want to walk us through, Jan, but I think we already know how we're going to feel about this one.
Yeah. So I'm here this evening with the results of an RFP that was issued on April 19th for our financial auditing services, as our contract expired last December. The RFP closed on the 13th. There was 2 RFP packages requested, but only one proposal, which was submitted by KPMG, which is merged with our current auditor, Allen and Partners. And there will be a slight impact to the 2022 budget. For the fees for that year are approximately $2,800 more. If council concurs, there will be a 5-year agreement that will come forward for approval next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, what are those unanimous? I love those unanimous folks. Thank you, Janet. As always, you're so thorough and prepared that you make making these decisions quite easy. Next is the acting mayor and Deputy Clerk Bennett. This is just sort of a housekeeping issue, but if you want to walk us through it, please.
Yes, so just quickly, I can refer you to, we have the acting mayor bylaw that stipulates who is the acting mayor for each month. And we've had a request to switch months for 2 members of council. So currently we have Councillor Allen, who is the acting mayor for July, and Councillor Brennan's the acting mayor for August. And the request is to have them switch months so that Councillor Brennan would be the acting mayor for July and Councillor Allen would be the acting mayor for August. So if council is supportive, we'll bring forward an exception to our acting mayor bylaw.
Any objections? Should we let them take their vacations? It's up to the rest of us. So we can pause if we have any objections.
Depends if we're hybrid or not.
Okay, so you have support for that, Nadine. Last thing on our agenda that was added as 8.8 is the strategic plan update, and I believe that's with CEO Morris. I do want to take a moment, CEO Morris, in case everybody's not as riveted by what you're about to tell us. Right now at 7 o'clock, for those viewers who are out there, on TVO, it started at 7 o'clock. It's the Smiths Falls episode of Crossroads Broom or Bust. Now, we're going to miss it, but it's going to be repeated again on June 16th at 9 p.m. and on June 19th at 8 p.m. So if you want to stay with us and hear the riveting news that CEO Morris is going to share with us tonight, or if you want to flip over to TVO and see Smiths Falls on Boom or Bust, and you will have 2 more opportunities on both the 16th and the 19th of June. Go ahead, CEO Morris, and let us know how we're doing.
Okay.
Give us our report card.
Thank you for that. Tough to compete against TVO, to be sure. But so for those perhaps not watching from elsewhere, this report was originally on the May 24th Committee of the Whole agenda. So it didn't appear on this agenda package, but it was on May 24th. So there's a lot of information here. I'll try and summarize it in a reasonably high level. Council has 6 priorities, and there are 41 initiatives that need to be accomplished to satisfy those 6 priorities. I'm happy to report this is the 6th update report for this term of council, and happy to report that all 6 priority areas are advancing, some quicker than others, but in an overall perspective, 39% of the 41 initiatives have been complete, they're finished. 59% are in progress, and some of them, most of those will be completed, I expect, before the next update that we provide to you in October. So things are progressing well. One item has not started because it relies on completion of one of the other initiatives. So I would say overall, things are progressing reasonably well, given the context we've been working in over the last 2 years. So just briefly, I'll go through priority number 1 is our housing priority. The big one there was the DC bylaw. It was adopted earlier this year. It came into force on June 1st. So that's essentially finished from a policy development point of view. Some of the other things we're working on are the bylaws and other policies related to the housing initiative, including our building bylaw. They're presently under review. We should have something to you in the next 6-month period. Priority 2 is quality of life. We have a whole host of things underway here. The biggest, arguably, is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. This committee has seen it several times. We expect to have a final version soon, I hope in the month of June, for you to consider and hopefully approve. One of the other big things were improvements in our parks. Council recently approved playground equipment in both Highland Corbett Park as well as Victoria Park. So the vendor knows they need to be installed, they're on order, and that will be done sometime this summer. The other thing is the tree canopy policy. That was a big one for this council. We have 50 trees, large caliper trees that are ready to go in, or they may be underway already, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, they will be planted. So we're certainly moving forward on that one. Priority 3 are transportation networks. A lot of really exciting projects in this bucket, so to speak. Obviously, the Beckwith Street Phase 2 is the big one. It's well underway and on track at this point for completion in September. Confederation Bridge, as we know, the EA, the municipal class EA is underway. We'll have public consultation later this month, and we'll be in a position to make a recommendation to this committee and ultimately council on the future crossing of the Rideau River. Transportation Master Plan is running, it's tracking a little bit behind schedule, but we do intend to prepare a tender or an RFP rather to go out to engage a consultant. That's on the docket for later this year. Very, very important policy piece that we need to put in place. Priority 4 is the waterfront development. We have a lot going on in this area. The former water treatment plant RFP is large, as arguably the largest. The RFP closes this Friday. And as Ms. Crowder indicated earlier in the meeting, we'll have something in front of you, we hope, within a month. Lighting up several of our waterfront assets are underway. I think Mr. Manhire indicated that earlier, so I won't repeat it. And one of the more exciting longer term projects is the design concepts for the Center Street redevelopment. We'll be kicking that off over the summer as well. Priority 5 is the tourism. Most of these have been completed, so I won't spend a lot of time on this one. The trail network converging in Smith Falls, that's been captured in the Parks and Rec Master Plan, so we need to come up with an implementation plan to make that happen once the master plan is approved. So that's well underway. The last one, and certainly an important one, is the Town Hall project. As Mr. Manhire indicated, it's well underway. We're looking at an October completion where you will be able to occupy a new, larger, spacious, well lit and beautiful council chamber. The town square project is underway. We've got some tenders out now. The band shell is one of them. It closes later this month. We're working on getting the hardscaping and landscaping in place. So we're going to see that very important people place come together over the summer months. So in summary, I would say we're tracking pretty well on target. I would add that this council is responsible for securing over $9.8 million in grants since this plan was approved. So for that, I think you should be very proud. And I'll give you an example. The town square project is almost entirely funded from other sources of money. That's an incredible accomplishment. So I think this council needs to be proud about the money that we've secured to make these things happen over the last 3.5 years. With that, I'll pause and answer any questions.
Thank you, CEO Morris. I will say that I don't think I or my colleagues would feel comfortable taking all the credit for the nearly $10 million. We make decisions, but it is the staff who positions us to be in the spot to be attractive for that funding. And I would say that town staff deserve as much or more credit than council does. Any other questions with regard to yes, Councillor McKenna?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, CEO Morris, and to the team Smith Falls for this incredible amount of work. I know this is more than the tip of the iceberg. It's probably half the iceberg of all of the work that the town staff do. Each year we put together a budget and name priorities that many times are in the strategic plan, but many times they're not. And there's asset management planning. And the context, all of this through a lockdown and COVID. So I can't understate the fact that this strategic plan is so far advanced at this stage, given everything else that staff have had to do in a tumultuous, unprecedented 2.5 years. It's still going on. So I hope the public look at the entire package. The report is good, it's excellent, but there's each year, there's all of that other work that goes on day in and day out by our staff. And I just say thank you. And if I'm ever have the opportunity to do another one of these, I would not be as ambitious, but thank you.
We were very idealistic at the beginning of the term. It was an ambitious strategic plan. Yes, Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, no, this is a great testament to staff's work over the last few years. And I'm a little bit anxious for some of these. I'd like to see that number a little higher than 30-some%, but we're in the home stretch and a lot of stuff. One thing I've noticed, some of these things have kind of evolved as we get them, but we haven't really had discussions at the committee of the whole. For example, 4.5, we were going to light up the falls and the Basque Bridge. Now we're going to light up Evergreen Avenue and the Basque Bridge. And now it's going to be solar instead of energized. It's and I'm just wondering, and then with the change in the light style, when we had that consensus around the Beckwith style of lights, and now we've got a completely new style. I'm just worried how some of these things are evolving without input. And I'm wondering, is that something we should add to a future COW to discuss, or what's the right outlet to have some input on some of these changes?
Theo Morris.
Through the chair. So yeah, I think there's an operational element to many of these that staff need to run with. But I think your point's well taken. If there's a significant shift in what we're doing, that information needs to come back to committee. Quite often, there is email communication with members of council to update on some of these things. There's also the director reports, the verbal reports that we do. But I think your point's well taken. If we have to deviate in a significant way, then that discussion needs to occur at this committee. So your point's well taken.
So is this something I should request to add to a future cow, or this item specifically, or is that?
That would be the best way to get it on an agenda, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions with regard to the strategic plan update? Seeing none, can I have a motion that this committee adjourn its proceedings at 7:25 PM and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of committee, the next duly called committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. All those in favor? Thanks very much, everyone.